What is it that you do?
I'm a sculptor.
What type of materials do you sculpt with?
I work with many materials. For instance, I work with clay, I work with wax, I work with two types of clay. Clay that's wet, clay that never dries, plasticina, and the wax is to be worked as a usage for casting in bronze.
How do you make a sculpture?
Well, we start off with an idea, whatever the idea may be. For instance, a person. If I'm working in a plasticina form, I use a wire armature inside because the plasticina does not crack. It's not a wet clay, it's a plastic type of clay, and it can take an armature and it can be moved. The armature inside is wire. If I work in wet clay, I work in a form where there cannot be armatures other than a bit of outside armaturing to hold it in the piece. It makes it harder to work that way. But wax is the culmination of everything. That's like the Cadillac when it comes down to sculpture, because it's transferred immediately into a bronze form.
How long does it take for you to make a sculpture?
Depending on the size of the sculpture and depending on the details of the sculpture, it could vary in time. For instance, if I'm working on a figure that's 10 to 12 to 15 to 16 inches in a plasticine, I can work and do it in an evening. I'm very fast. I'm a commercial artist. So if I have to have a deadline, I work much faster. If I don't have a deadline, I can work on 3 or 4 pieces at the same time. Working in wax is also quite quick, but it's a different result. Working in wet clay is the slowest.
Alright. How long have you sculpted?
I've been sculpting since I was 4. I was a child prodigy. I started at 4. I had a very, very fortunate start because my mother was always into the arts. She was an aspiring opera singer. And I had an uncle of mine who was a fellow that had in touch with many different artists in New York City. I come from New York. And he introduced me to many great artists.
What is the main subject of your sculptures?
Right as of now, most of my subject matter is human beings. I work in many, many groupings. I don't like one piece, and I don't like things that are static. I work with many pieces that move, people in action, activities.
What are you working on now?
Perfect. Right as of now, I'm working on a project for Woodstock, the 1969 Woodstock Festival, which featured many, many artists, perhaps close to 1,000 different artists. It sounds strange, but it was a 3-day affair. I'm doing quite a few of them in a 17-inch format to be cast. It's in wax to be cast into bronze.
Who are some subjects in the sculpture?
Well, I don't know who would be listening to this interview, but I doubt very much if they would know, but I'll list off a few of them. I'm doing Jimi Hendrix, I'm doing Janis Joplin, I'm doing Roger Daltrey, I'm doing Country Joe and the Fish, I'm doing Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Young being the addition at that particular time. It was Crosby, Stills, Nash, Joan Baez, and many, many more.
What is your favorite sculpture?
My favorite sculpture is pieces all over the world. I have no favorite sculpture. At any given day, I find other sculptures that are wonderful. I would never nail down one sculpture because all artists are good. Some are different than others, but art is art, and it's always in the eye of the beholder.
Who is your biggest influence?
My biggest influence was an artist that was in New York City at the time. His name was Alan Williams. Alan Williams was a sculptor of monuments. He did many monuments. He did what they call bas-relief or bas-relief, which was pieces that were 16 feet by 12 feet. And it was bas-reliefs are 3/4 coming out of the format. They're not full round. They don't stand on themselves, but they give you the appearance of being much deeper. He did many, many different major figures in that time. Also, an artist that was called Franklin Booth. Franklin Booth was a pen and ink artist. He was the greatest pen and ink artist that ever lived. His canvases were 12 feet tall by 6 feet wide. And he worked with a cuticle pusher from time to time. He was famous for doing Bibles, many different Bibles, and illustration for the Bibles. and not the Old Testament, but the New Testament.
How would you define an artist?
There is no defining of an artist. An artist is amongst us all the time. There are people that are artists that don't know they're artists. There are many people that live as a typewriter repair person and have a great ability for craft. There are many people that paint in a strange manner. There are many artists that do things that people don't believe is art, but everything is art. Breathing is an art. So, and sometimes it becomes very sure that breathing is an art. So there's art everywhere, all around us, all the time, for the rest of our lives and for the rest of the generations that come.
All right, thank you.
Bravo.